Works. It's good to know.
It helps me a lot.
The one person you probably didn't want to have Mike Ricky.
How would you know that? That's some good self-awareness. All right, should work now. Yep. All right, thank you everyone for coming to the Economic Development Committee. First on the agenda here, we have a presentation from Amy Collinsworth. She's the Economic Development Director for our region. And she has a few things to share with us. There can be a little bit of Q&A, but otherwise, any other further information she can send us and share on our committee page as well. So without further ado, please come up to the podium. Thank you.
All right, make sure this works. Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Amy Collinsworth. I am the Katahdin Region Economic Development Director. I work for Eastern Maine Development Corporation, and I work with the Katahdin Region Development Board. I'm here today to just kind of give you a little bit of a high overview of some of the things that Eastern Maine Development Corporation can do for the region, and any other resources or questions that you may have, you can feel free to reach out to me and I will connect you to the right people. So I do have a couple pages here that have a little bit of a write-up on what we do. I know we have a full agenda, so I'll just kind of touch on some high points. If you have a question and I don't know it, I promise I will get back to you. So at the end, I will leave some business cards and I will also send it to you guys up there and to Peter as well. So a couple of things, we are really involved in workforce development, and we have Kevin Gregory down at the Higher Ed Center who we can help. And we do a lot of things with individualized services and access to training, education, and skill development for employees and employers, and helping them identify goals and create a plan for their future. We work a lot with the adults, youth, displaced workers, agricultural industry specific, and jail diversion training and job coaching for recently incarcerated people. We work with economic development as community impact lending, and we help to find funds for businesses for owners of startups, operations, and expansions at the competitive interest rates and terms. We do regional project development. We provide technical assistance and support to larger projects that are more regional in nature. We also are offering brownfield assessment and revolving loan funds for cleanup projects. As part of the Regional Planning Commission, we do comprehensive planning, which I believe Millinocket, East Millinocket, and Medway all have one compiled one, which I actually did read when I first got it, and it was pretty interesting. So for those of you that don't know that a municipality doesn't have one, we can help you even if you've gone with somebody else. EMBC can help and reevaluate it so that you are recognized by the state in order to get grants and certain funding. We can also help with transportation planning. State and federal funding can be leveraged to revive our systems and provide reliable transportation to our communities. We also do land use and coastal project planning. APEX, or formerly known as PTAC, is part of a nationwide group of procurement technical assistance centers that provide technical assistance and training to businesses so that they can find, win, and perform on government contracts. We also have been working with a new program in climate resilience. This is an opportunity for municipalities and tribal communities to mitigate damage from extraordinary temperatures, flooding, drought, and other consequences from climate change. We also work on expanding broadband planning and infrastructure. So we work with communities to increase and access broadband in Eastern Maine. And while fiber optics and other telecom technology infrastructure exists in parts of the region, more availability, increased speeds, and adoption for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and communities and residents are still needed. We also do investments through federal, state, local, and private resources. And we also do second stage business growth. This will allow to help growth through our comprehensive package of services, business development, government contracting, lending, and workforce development. And like I said, I have a lot more information on each bullet point, and I also put the web address so that if you guys wanted to look further into it, it's linked right there. So any questions?
Well, thank you for that overview. Obviously, EMDC does a lot here and you're kind of their arm regionally and locally. Does anyone have any questions for Amy while she's here?
Just one.
Go ahead.
Amy, does Eastern Maine Development have anything, that they're working on within the town of Millinocket that you are aware of currently for any type of economic development or growth?
I believe, and Peter, we're working with the town to help with the Millinocket Regional Airport. Is that, I believe that we were helping work with that grant that started before I started.
Yeah, and EMDC is the administrator for our NBRC, Northern Border Regional Commission.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any other comments from the committee or the public? Seeing none. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from Arcadia Design Works on the airport terminal building. Just to give a little backstory before they start, the town's gone through multiple phases here on this project. The first phase, the town funded, it was basically a preliminary phase to gather information on what the public might want to see in a future airport terminal building. We spent a smaller amount of money in comparison to what we received on the second phase, which was largely funded by an NBRC grant, Northern Border Regional Commission grant, it's federal funds. That funded our second phase, which pays for the engineering and design plans for the airport terminal building. The committee has basically worked on this project all along and has selected Arcadia Design Works on this project for both phases. So they're here to give an update on the progress so far on our engineering and design phases. They're working with Haley Ward out of Bangor for engineering. And we have Patrick Santerre and Celeste here as well, working on the design and architecture side of it. So without further ado, Patrick and Celeste, I'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Steve. We're going to just show some updated images. We were thinking it'd be cool to do a virtual reality tour of the building. And we will offer that for anyone in town at any other given day. We just have to set it up for time. And as you mentioned, Celeste is my partner and Haley Ward, and then we have an FAA consultant out of Concord, New Hampshire. So this is a quick image just to give you an idea of where we are on the earth. Millinocket has the green and the red line, and those are axes from the airport terminal to the mountain, because the mountain is very dominant and we would like to highlight it in the building. And notice the yellow one as well, Route 157 axis. We'll talk about that a little further in the presentation. So this is the existing FBO building, built in the 1950s. It is, to say the least, worn and needing some attention, which would probably mean demolition in terms of attention. It's non-universal access, so you'd have to, there's no ramp to the building. And the idea of, and I think Steve was very instrumental in just saying, why don't we have a nicer terminal building? And that was part of the inspiration for this project, I believe. And Jeff Campbell, who is the manager, is has been, you should be able to just hit the arrow key. Okay. So this is, yeah, there you go. So this is the projected occupancy. And so we start with a program, everything from main entrance to restrooms, to a kitchen area, to having met with other, folks in town, to have an event center. So we felt as though this is a great opportunity for the community to potentially use the building beyond just the general aviation. You could have an event such as a wedding or a large meeting, or someone could fly in from a company and So here's the airport. And basically we have two runways, 1624 is the one that parallels the terminal, the FBO building. It just doesn't. It should just use it instead of the box. No, I guess it's not in the.
Yeah, look at your, I'll try it.
This program is really, it's a beautiful program where you can just stick your images in and then you can create a path to go through, but apparently it goes back to the beginning everywhere. So this is the site plan. And in order to have an event center, you're gonna need parking. This is a lot more than what we do need per the zoning ordinance of Millinocket. The question is, would it be helpful to have this? And if you can see on the right, you have the existing hangar, the utility, the building that houses the snow blower and the plows, and the footprint of the new building. The site, you know, you think that the airport has a lot of land, has 322 acres, but this particular site is pretty tight because we have a hydrant where you can fill your plane with fuel, and then we have a communication tower, and then we have a gate against the hangar. So we have to nestle the building into that space. So this is the floor plan, and I apologize that the walls aren't darker, but what you can see is it. Actually, I need to go up.
You can take the microphone with you.
Okay. So as you drive in, you drive in here and you enter right here into the main entrance, and from there well, actually, if you want to, there you go. So then you got a lobby in the middle, and the goal here, and this is part of the program, was could we have an air carrier like we did in the 60s and the 70s or the 60s? Continental flew out of Millinocket years ago. Could we have like a Cape Air that flies a 9-person jet into the Katahdin region? And so you'd have, if we can allure an air carrier into the terminal, we would then need a TSA, and we have baggage, and we have a waiting area, and that's all in that section there. If you're coming for an event, you would go into the event center, which is on your left, and that could hold. We have to keep the building under 300 occupants, so we're over. It's over 100-person event center, and then there's a door through a storefront glass wall that lets you go into an observation viewing terrace right there, so you could actually sit, have a drink, and watch the planes come and go. And then also, like this meeting today, we could have held this meeting in the collab as you go through the front entrance. Right near the front entrance is a separate door. You don't even have to go in the lobby itself. You can just go pull in. You can walk in and have a meeting right in that collab. There's a kitchen to the left of the entrance, and then a mechanical room. The restrooms are above that, and then there's also a shower for the pilots and vending area. So we'll talk about these systems in another slide, but when a pilot does fly in, there's a pilot lounge next to the collab, and then there's a flex room which could be used by TSA because they need an office, or it could be a rental vehicle company. It could be anything associated. It could be a company that just leases space from the town to have an office at the airport terminal. And then there's a retail component for oil and charts that Jeff sells, and then an assistant manager, ideally in the future, and then the manager's office is in the corner where he or she has views of the runways. So that's the floor plan. And then if you go upstairs, we have a small upstairs space, which has another rentable office space, and then where it says TBT above, that's a mechanical space for future mechanical equipment. So it's a very small second story. So this is what Jeff would call the front of the building, which is what you would see from the runway. So if you landed with, let's say, Cape Air, and you enter into the building through that portal, right where the people are, and then to the left of that is the baggage, and then the window, the bigger window to the left is where the waiting area would be to come to take a flight. And then this is just the north view. And I think the key here is the large picture window, which will go in a little bit further in the next slide. So when you come into town, when you come in through Dobie, everyone, I think everyone has seen this, but do you really understand what you're seeing? And this has perplexed me to the point where I've been studying, I've been researching, why does the mountain look so big in this view? And it's an optical illusion, and it has something to do with the aperture, the 1-point perspective of the line of the road, the trees going to 1 point. There's also things that are associated with potentially the curvature of the earth, which might be a bit of a stretch, but if you do research, Da Vinci, that's what they thought. The harvest moon, when it comes over the horizon, looks really enormous. So this is the view from 157 going straight to Dobie, but then when you turn the corner onto the flowage, the impoundment, the mountain appears small again. It goes from macro to micro. So this phenomena is something that I'm fascinated with. Our company has been doing, like I said, research, and we would like to have that phenomena somehow in the building. So we did some studies. We created this aperture. I got access to the sludge pile just to see, is the mountain different from that vantage point? And as you can see, if you do an aperture, then of course the mountain's blurry in this image, but go to the next image. And if you pull back, as you pull back or you pull forward, the mountain is framed where it looks, because of its aperture, it's framed and it looks bigger than maybe what it maybe really is. So we're studying that through the aperture, and we've learned that Epheringhos phenomena states that if you have the same circles, the orange circles are the same size, but when you have something in adjacency that might appear bigger, you'll have the phenomena that looks smaller on the left and looks larger on the right. That optical illusion we would like to capture in the architecture of this building. And then the other image shows that they do say that there is a curvature of the earth, the atmosphere, that creates an illusion, or it distorts the image of something in the distance. So we're thinking there's a combination of things happening in Millinocket, on the way to Millinocket and the mountain, that would be a draw to the building, as well as just an interesting phenomena to have in the building. So the way the inside of the building would create that is, we have the roof sloping down to that picture window. We have the glass wall that's adjacent to the runway, angled also to the window. And then, the floor is obviously level, but we're hoping that through the structure of the building, that we will be able to increase the scale, or optically make the mountain look bigger than maybe what it really is. It's not proven yet, but we're certainly going to try. And then another view from the lobby, looking into the event center, down the hallway to the restrooms and the kitchens to the left, and the collab is right to your left as well. And that's from the observation terrace, where we could sit, and like I said, we could watch planes, or it could be a breakout area for a session or a meeting or an event. So some technology too. So we have this large south wall in the building. So what we did was we built this test module, because we'd like the building not to be able to have to use a petroleum-based fuel. And so we built this, it's a hybrid strom wall. So behind the polycarbonate panel is a cementitious panel that's painted black, and the sun beats down on it. And in the period of we have data loggers that were in this box that from 9 to 4 o'clock. And Jeff, I didn't mention that the data loggers that Haley Ward has been using, we got a temperature of 175 degrees inside the box. And we have a thermometer in the building and it's maxed out at 158, something like that.
158 is the highest I've seen. It's almost any time there's any sun, it would go greater than 158.
Yeah, and if you think about that, that's 158 and it could be 6 degrees below zero. And when we first set this up, it was literally those two cold, extremely 2 or 3 cold days that we had, and we were averaging 120 to 158. The highest we've gotten was 175. The goal would be is, can we take that heat and use it as an exchange it with the systems that we would have in the building? And Peter can.
It's warm.
We're not. We said to Jeff, if this microwave bites the dust, he could bring his food out and heat it up in the test module. So in scale, that test module is 1/20th of the wall of the south side of the building. So if we could, whatever numbers we gather, we could potentially exponentially multiply by 20, and that information would help determine whether the system would be viable. So the goal with the system is, the building is, we want to do a geothermal system where we use the heat exchange from the earth. It comes up into the upper second floor, which we had shown on the second floor, where you have heat exchangers. And if we can do the solar heat panels, we're speaking with a company in Biddeford that if you go to Bangor at the airport, at the National Guard building has a solar heat panel system in place. If we find out that it's just not feasible because it is a seasonal use, then we may also just do a photovoltaic that would then drive the motors and the pumps for the geothermal. And then the green would be a small pellet boiler system that would be in the building to supplement the heating system in the building on the really extreme cold days of the winter. But ideally, we're not using any fossil fuels other than. So then when we first presented the building, one thing that we were really excited about was, what is the angle of the mountain? And it turns out that what we've elected to do is we measured from a photograph to the best of our ability. Is it the true slope of Mount Katahdin? But I think it's kind of an interesting diagram. I can actually see myself with a t-shirt of this diagram. But the 9 degrees, which is the major east-west slope of Katahdin, is the slope of the building. And that's the 9 degrees or 12 to 1, 12 to 2 to 12 pitch for the building. So for that front, as you drive on site, we would have potentially banners for if there was an event. There would be an opportunity, like I said, we could have this meeting in this building. And I think the thing that's really exciting about the building too is that there's an economic opportunity here. Jeff's already making revenue with the sale of fuel and other items. But I think there's a greater opportunity here where this building is the first thing you see when you fly, other than the town above, from above. When you land, this is the first impression you'll get of Millinocket. And we really want it to be an inspiration for anyone coming from away to say, hey, this community really has their act together. They know the importance of aviation and the economy that's associated with aviation, and it's not going away. It's going to be even more prevalent in the future. So we would like Millinocket to be on the forefront of communities in this part of the state of Maine.
Well, thank you, Patrick and Celeste. And Jeff, if you don't mind coming up, Patrick just spoke to the importance of aviation in general, but to the community as well. A lot of people, including myself, are not regular flyers and don't understand maybe the world of aviation and what our airport actually does offer. Could you give some examples of how our airport is actually important to the region and how it might bring people here from different perspectives?
One very important piece of this puzzle is something that went on today over there. I just sent the manager a picture of an airplane that was over there that just brought a cancer patient back from Boston that had major surgery for cancer. And we have those what are called PALS flights, and depending on the organization, angel flights. We have an airport that's capable of handling any of this stuff in bad weather, good weather, or whatever. We have a facility that can handle the types of aircraft that are being used to do these free flights for people to Boston area hospitals for treatment. So that was one of the big things, and it went on today. And I sold jet fuel to this gentleman that was flying the airplane on his own nickel. He was paying for the whole thing himself. We offer a variety of things there as far as people traveling in, whether it be business travelers or recreational travelers, or just people wanting to do pleasure flying. We have 19 aircraft based over there, which is the personal side of it, plus skydiving, plus scenic flights, all of that. Opening up a terminal building like this will provide us a way to offer flights, to connecting flights to Augusta or Rockland or Boston, for that matter, Portland. So somebody could get on an airplane right here and end up at a major hub to get on an airline or to go elsewhere. There's just a huge list of opportunities. The life flight aspect of it. The fire chief's ambulance is over there all the time, dropping off and picking up patients that fly on their aircraft, life flight of Maine's aircraft, and helicopters. I sell a tremendous amount of fuel to helicopters doing emergency services. So the list goes on. I'm kind of on the spot here tonight. I didn't have anything prepared, but the list goes on, and if given a little thought and a little time, it's quite a lot of things, honestly. So it's really the gateway to the outside world. That's the real thing there. So
Thank you, Jeff. I know you were put on the spot, but that was very good. Well done. No, but as Jeff mentioned, the airport is not only essential for what he had mentioned, also for mill site development when we're talking about global or international companies looking to come in and move here. It's a very essential piece to that. But the idea of this terminal building was to be multi-use as well, to serve a wide range of functions for the town of Millinocket, including if we wanted to hold meetings or have larger events. There really isn't any other place in our town to do so. So that was part of the thought there, and it could also be revenue generating if we're looking at renting out space for events such as weddings or other functions, conventions or whatnot. But with that being said, though, and thank you for the update from Arcadia Design Works, does anyone have any questions or comments on our current progress for that project?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
do we have a timeline for being able to see the final project as far as the engineering design phase of it? When can we expect completion of that?
That's actually a good question. Architecturally, we are probably 85% done drawings. We're having just a hard time getting the engineering package in hand. I would like to be able to answer that specifically, but I would hope that by the end of March, we have documents that would be either permitted. We'll meet with the fire marshal again, because we do not want any. We want to make sure that we don't want any. We don't be blindsided with any code issues that we have not seen ourselves. We'll be doing that probably in the next week or two. But in terms of the drawings being available for estimating or even putting out to bid, it's something that we're not going to put out to bid, but they will be. We will try to get them by the end of March so that we could then at least go to a fundraising or get to the point where we can start figuring out how much this is going to cost us. and start fundraising. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Just a quick comment on the fact that I think that, more so than practically any other project in the municipality, that airport terminal is a must moving forward to the 21st century. I think it's where you start from and you build out from. I believe that it has been long overdue. And I would like to see, like I say, it's not a want, it's a need. And I think the community needs this airport terminal and needs this airport as it is, standing as it is with the 2 runways. Very, very important for this area and for the central part of the state of Maine. So I look forward to this project moving forward. And I would like to go ahead and see what can happen once the designs are done for, as you said, to start determining cost and fundraising to move forward on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Madore. And just to add to that, part of the next phases will also include the public and the council or the committee, excuse me, on picking different materials for carpet and design and things like that. Obviously, this is a building that will be serving the entire community. So the whole public is welcome to participate in these committee meetings to actually do a more hands-on approach into what type of carpet style you'd like to see, what kind of paint colors you'd like to see. So it really is a participatory project for the community to decide how our building will look moving forward.
Anything but shag.
Thank you, Councilman Madore. Constructive feedback. Any other committee or public comment, Jeff?
I wanted to make one more comment about moving into the future, since Mr. Madore brought it up. I'm in discussions right now with Beta Technologies to become a charging station for electric aircraft. Moving forward, FedEx and UPS are both looking into using electric aircraft to move their stuff, and they're looking for someplace between Rockland and Presque Isle, and guess where we sit?
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Any other comment? And seeing none. That moves us to our community garden staffing for upcoming season. This past season, we've been really fortunate to have Thrive Penobscot and Brittany Gruder serve that function. In the past, the town has had interns sponsored by the Sierra Club to do projects for seasons or 3 to 6 months periods of time. We are currently looking for opportunities for someone to manage the community garden this upcoming year. My suggestion is we put out basically an advertisement, just like we do for committees or other things like that, to see if anyone from the public might be interested in managing the community garden this year. If there's any other thoughts, though, from the committee or the public on that. Councilor Madore?
Mr. Chairman, did we ever go ahead and I'd be curious of a recap or final thing of how the garden ended up as far as the amount of people participating in the garden, what type of participation was it? Was it people doing it as single families or as groups or as nonprofits, as far as like say, I'd like to see something like this in the community garden where if it was moving forward, that part of it could be donated to the local food bank to be able to offer fresh vegetables or whatever. So was there any final, I believe Brittany understands what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I believe I did give a quick overview at the end of last growing season, but basically we had a range of age of participants from like early teenager to 70 plus. So it was a lot of different people in the community. Not everyone lived over in that area, but a lot of people liked that location because of the being in the park and being on the trail. So people go for a walk and then stop at their garden plot and keep going. People did appreciate it, the participants, but there was maybe some lack in communication of what the community garden focus was that last season. Whether it was like if it's growing, then you can pick it, or if it is that person's plot, maybe we should respect that. And both models are used and both models are great. This first season, we just wanted to kind of get a base model of what it could look like. And maybe from that, there could be some sort of volunteer group that did manage the community garden themselves, and they could do that kind of model where they were donating food or using it for fundraising at like a farmer's market or something like that. But yeah, it was overall successful. People who had costs want them again this next growing season. I haven't done any outreach this year so far on that. It's still pretty early, but overall, very much a success.
Good. Thank you.
So in terms of advertising for this upcoming season, should we put out an advertisement similar to what we do for committees or even town employee opportunities just on the website and the paper, seeking any interest in managing the community garden?
Yes. I believe so.
Anyone from the public have any comments on that? Okay, that's what we'll suggest to the council then. Moving forward. Inventory on town-owned lots to put out as an RFP for developers. This has been something we've talked about a number of times. Town owns various pieces of property throughout the community, whether they're individual lots within existing communities or larger tracts of lands that need further development. I've had the idea for some time that we should create an inventory of those pieces of property and understand what exactly we have and how those can be best utilized for economic growth for the town, whether it be put out for residential purposes, whether we invest in infrastructure that we can bring into larger tracts of land to be sold as individual lots, either for commercial or residential. So right now I do have a very preliminary list. It doesn't really give addresses for all of them. But over the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping that we can get more specifics, maybe on a map of what these lots are. And then as a committee, we can kind of look at them on that map and decide, should we put these out for bid for developers? What kind of incentives can we offer, whether it's a certain amount of time that we, take off property taxes or waive any kind of development fees. There's a lot of things that we can do to hopefully incentivize that, especially after coming right off that announcement from Katahdin Aqua Farms. I think there's more and more interest in this community for future development, and it could be a good time that we start putting some of our properties out there for developers to look at as a potential for development. Does anyone have any thoughts on that from the committee? Councilor Madore?
Yeah, so basically what you're proposing would be some kind of grid overlay on the town site to point out, what we have and what we don't have as far as. I think that's a very good idea. I think it's a strong indication. I know personally, I'd like to know a little bit more about what we own for properties. I don't believe that we've had an update on that for quite some time. And I think that having, like I say, having it as a, not just as a list of properties, but literally having a map grid where you could spot and see where location, size, accessibility to utilities and things like that would be very important moving forward. And I would suggest that take place.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any other committee comment? Higgins?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Going off Katahdin Salmon, they're saying that they about 80+ jobs. So we're gonna need places for these people to stay. That map would also show what big pieces of land that we've got, so we can actually break them out for additional housing lots, correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's the idea. And when we put out an RFP, once we have an idea of what those lots are and, you know, what our desires might be for that, in those RFPs, we can talk about what zoning it's in, if we're willing to make changes on those zonings to allow for different types of construction that would otherwise not be allowed. And then we can get a feel for what people might think of, you know, what's possible on that site. Obviously, economics plays a big role in that. So that's why I mentioned incentives. If we can offer, you know, potentially even the lot for free, if we get guarantees that a certain amount of construction or development will be done within a certain time frame, that allows basically a lot that we're currently paying insurance on be turned into something that we can actually generate revenue from. But also benefit the other areas such as housing or commercial development as well. So that's kind of the thought there. We can put our ideas out and see what developers might come back with.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Madore?
First, Sandy Sullivan's had her hand up for quite a while.
Thank you.
Hi,
Sandra, go ahead.
Sandy Sullivan, 104 Sunset Drive. Not being a developer, what does RFD mean, or whatever those initials are, RFP? What does that stand for?
RFP is a request for proposal. So essentially, we're requesting from developers a proposal on what they might do with that property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
The other part of what I was going to ask, Mr. Chairman, is this something we're going to have, if we are looking at setting up an evaluation of the properties and things of what they could be used for, I would suggest that we try to coordinate that with the planning board, because obviously we have the town zone in certain areas for certain things that may require a change of use. If we decide that something, for instance, is residential, maybe we want to go residential, commercial, or, you know, and change those up. So I would suggest that once the parcels are identified, we go ahead and again overlay those with the planning board and the long range plan for the town as far as use is concerned.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any other comments? Mr. Dumais?
Jesse Dumais, 10 Somerset Street, Millinocket, Maine. You're gonna hear RFP throughout the agenda tonight, so I think it would behoove for the public and for people like Sandy, those who are not familiar with the process of an RFP, if you could briefly explain that to them and the process of that with the council and the manager, I think that would be helpful.
I would be happy to. So an RFP, request for proposal, is usually put out and advertised just like you would a job description. You put it out there for a certain amount of time. There's a deadline in which someone can respond to it. And they have a certain amount of time as well to ask any questions that they might have on that project to make sure that what they are providing is as accurate as possible. Once they apply with their proposal, the committee would then review the applicants, again, just like a job application, where we go over the different criteria, if they're meeting kind of our idea of what we'd like to see happen. Then the committee would make their determinations and recommend those to the town council. So the council will then look at what the committee recommended, the explanation as to why. And of course, that entire process is all a public process. So both in the committee and the town discussion, the public can both participate in and comment on everything that we're discussing. And then the town can either accept or reject any or all of those proposals. So thank you, Mr. Dumais, for asking that. Are there any questions on that process, though? If anyone has any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Amy, did you have something?
Thank you. And actually, that was something else that I should have told you guys about that EMBC does. And it's kind of one of my big responsibilities assigned to me by the Penobscot County Commissioners. I don't know if you want to pull up the Select Main Sites tool right now, if you have time. If not, I can put that on that packet. But the DECD, as well as EMBC and myself, we are one of the few administrators that have access to a state level tool that's basically to promote commercial property. So what I've been doing is going around to the whole Katahdin region and from here to Island Falls, and anything that's commercial, either it's land or building, I have been uploading to the Select Main Sites tool with a coworker of mine. We do all the assessments, there's leasing, do the price of that, there's photos, there's dimensions. So thank you, Peter. So if you type in Millinocket, you might see some duplications. I don't know if my colleague has gotten rid of them yet. I think if you type in Millinocket. So one of the biggest ones that we actually were able to do is I worked with Steve Sanders of One North, and I got the Millinocket mill site up there. So they will be able to even use this to help bring in tenants, just like the Katahdin Salmon. So there may be properties up here that are being sold or in the process of being sold that I'm not aware of. So please let me know. We've been working with local realtors, Northwoods Realty and Bruce McLean and Debbie Gersa, EA Dave Dawson. I've also been trying to get in touch with the owner of the Katahdin Suites because I know that's for sale, or at least it was, and that would be an ideal one. So just wanted to let you guys know that this is available, and this could probably help, at least instead of recreating the wheel, use this. We can tailor it. Ben Sturdivant from the DECD helps, and then we can relist through their website and LinkedIn as well. So just wanted to make sure you guys were aware.
Thank you for that. That does tie into the recent Elks property that we actually purchased, which has some potential commercial street frontage as well. Very close to purchasing. Should be done, but anyway. With that being said, is there any other? Yes, Patrick.
So being that I reside on Boston Drive, I'm not part of Arcadia, but for this comment, but having worked with zoning ordinances throughout the state, and I was the chair of the zoning board in Portland for years. The zoning ordinance of Millinocket, having gone through it, it really could use an update. And with potential of Millinocket getting into this much development in the coming future, it would behoove us to take a good look, if it's possible, to see how we could model it to some other communities that have already updated their zoning ordinances that are experiencing growing pains. So just something that we might want to address in the future.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate the comment. Any other comment on this agenda item? And seeing none. So with that, the manager will come back at some point for our next committee meeting with that map overlay, and we can discuss the potentials then at the next meeting. Discussion on short-term rentals. So just to give an update on everyone, it's been a little bit since the two committees have come together. It used to be two separate committees, economic development and sustainability. The last that we left off with short-term rentals, to go way back, the planning board had made suggestions to the town council on what language might be used for a new ordinance to deal with short-term rental registrations. The council at that time felt that the language needed to be worked on a bit more and referred that process to the Economic Development Committee. During the Economic Development Committee, we determined that the language that was put together by Bar Harbor was the closest fitting to what we were trying to achieve. What we were trying to achieve was simply creating a registration process so that the people staying in these units and the town itself knows who the owners are in case there's a need to reach out to them for either emergency purposes or otherwise. It would require an inspection, just as any change of use of any property in town would require an inspection. And from there on out, we can basically decide here what we want to recommend to the council for the more specifics. Bar Harbor had two different types of short-term rental definitions. We are looking to stick with only one. They had VR1 and VR2. So basically, we would just create one definition of what a short-term rental is, I believe, and we can go over that again. We determined anything under 30 days was considered a short-term rental. If there's any opposition to that, we can discuss that further. But beyond that, if you have not already grabbed the paper up here, you're more than welcome to, of the draft language. A lot of this was taken out from the Bar Harbor ordinance that was created. Some of it needs to be cleaned up to be specific to Millinocket. But what we started doing was going page by page. It's only 3 pages long, to create basically a recommendation for the council. My suggestion is we go through all pages today, go over it one more time, for any, if we have anything that we need to look into before making a complete recommendation to the council. And then at the next committee meeting, after we do that, make a recommendation. So if there's any opposition to that, please speak to that now.
Oh, when
Yes, please, Renee.
when would be an appropriate time for just raising some questions about the Bar Harbor language?
If it's a general question, you can ask it right now.
No, I just had a few points, so I'll just wait for when a good time would be.
Okay, thanks for asking. So as we go through this, we'll go through each point, whether it's A, B, C, or subsection 1, 2, 3. I'll open up to everyone, including the public, to be able to comment on that. So if there's a specific part of this that you want to speak to, I'll call on you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to start, section A, short-term rentals must comply. It cannot be in violation with chapter blank. We'll have that filled in with the planning board to make sure we're using the right terminology. Land use ordinance, refer to chapter blank for information on where short-term rentals are allowed, related definitions and standard. Does anyone have any comment on that first part? Okay. Section B, no person shall advertise for rent, and just take out the next rent as a duplication, or operate a short-term rental without a valid registration issued pursuant to this chapter. Any comment on that?
I have a question about the implementation of it. If someone already has a short-term rental in operation with existing renters, up to a year, how the wording would fit in with them being allowed to continue doing their business until the registration is completed, which I assume will be contingent upon the inspection, the safety inspection.
Yep, that's a good question. Thank you. We had discussed basically setting a deadline for any short-term rentals, whether they are new or existing, to apply for and get their inspection and registration done.
Do you recall how long that deadline was?
I mean, it's difficult to say right now until it's going to the council, because until we have an idea of what that timeline might look like. I don't want to just throw out an arbitrary date, unless we might want to do it by the January 1st of every year or something like that. But if this gets passed by the council, a week before that date that we put in here, that doesn't really serve anyone. Perhaps we can write in the language and keep it blank, just like we did in the previous one, that it should be done by this time every year, and keep that blank. I believe we have a similar process with the Peddler's Hill permit and other permits, like liquor licenses and others that have a certain time frame to apply.
Right.
So if it's all right with everyone, I could include a blank space in this, apply by a certain date, just keep that open until the council looks at it. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comment on B? Okay, seeing none. Going to C, the owner of a short-term rental shall complete and post the emergency information sheet provided by the code enforcement officer on or about the inside of the front or main door of the dwelling unit for convenient inspection by the occupant. The emergency information sheet shall include, but is not limited to, the following information: registration number, physical addresses of the short-term rental, and instruction on how to contact emergency responders, information on how to file a complaint regarding life safety requirements with the town of Millinocket, the name, mailing address, email address, and telephone number of the owner, and the name, email address, and telephone number of a local contact, if different from the owner, who will be available to respond to problems and emergencies. And in the last meeting we had, I also suggested we added another line to this, number 6, that would include relevant local ordinances, such as noise ordinances, parking ordinances, things like that, odor, things that might apply so that we don't disrupt the neighborhood as they currently function.
I think it's a very good idea.
Are there any comments on this C and the subsections that I read? Jesse?
So, I don't know if it's appropriate at this section, but I think it fits. I think there's some, Jesse, 10 Somerset Street, Millinocket, Maine. Some potential for abuse here. I know of some Airbnb or short-term rentals that have 4 or 5 in the complex, but they're hidden underneath like 1 or 2 long-term tenants, and the rest of them being short-term rentals. So would those have to register as short-term rentals, or do they get shuffled under long-term rental?
It would be for any unit that is rented out for short-term use as defined by 30 days or less.
Right.
So if there's, let's say, a 6-unit building, 5 of them are leased for long-term over 30 days, those would not have to comply with this. The 1 unit would have to. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none. Section D, the registration number shall be posted on all advertising, including but not limited to online platforms. Any comment? Seeing none. Section E, at the time of issuance of a registration, the property taxes, town water fees, and or town sewer fees associated with the property to be rented as a short-term rental shall not be in arrears. Any comment? Seeing none. Section F, prior to the issuance of a registration, the dwelling unit to be used as a short-term rental must pass the life safety inspection per subsection. So we just include the town code there. In between inspection cycles, the property owner shall attest in writing that the dwelling unit complies with the regulations in section blank. Any comments on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor Madore?
are we going to require that the short-term rental be inspected yearly? Or is this something that's going to be that we could space out where the inspection can take place every 2 years or 3 years as far as the period of time? Does this have to be something, because I worry about overloading the code enforcement officer and the health inspector as far as trying to do this on a yearly basis and get it all in by a certain amount of time.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. I believe the language that was proposed by the planning board was a one-time unless there was a complaint. Is that right, Mr. Malcolm?
That's what we suggest.
Yes. So it would just be a one-time registration and inspection, or one-time inspection, I should say. And unless there's a complaint made by an occupant or a neighbor, in which case the safety officer would come and review the property. Any other comments on that?
Paul Malcolm, 73 School Street. The only difference, Steve, I think with that was we had determined if that changed ownership, that it would require a new inspection. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make that note in here. Okay, section G, trash shall be removed on a weekly basis while the property is being rented as a short-term rental. Any issues?
There
Celeste?
should be, oh, sorry.
Celeste, go ahead.
Hi, Celeste Bard, 22 Balsam Drive. Maybe there should be a caveat, if it's a commercial building and there's a dumpster, it gets picked up every other week. I mean, I don't know if it's necessary to do that, it's kind of getting in fine weeds, but depends how strict it's gonna be, I guess.
You're sitting the whole time.
Mine never go.
Thank you, Celeste. I think last time we reviewed this, we talked about there just being no trash or debris left around the building. And keeping it big like that. Renee, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna make the same comment because we have a once a month dumpster.
So how does the language sound if we say, short-term rentals shall be free of any trash or debris, on a continuous basis?
Sounds reasonable.
All right, section H, I believe we struck because it related more to Bar Harbor's one of two VR 1 or 2. One of the differentiating aspects of their code was that they allowed for a live-in property owner to be able to rent a portion of their property versus someone who owned it as a commercial property. So this section H speaks to someone who owns the property, lives in the property, and rents out a portion of their property, which really would not fit in with our one ordinance here. So if everyone's okay with it, we would basically just strike section H unless there's other comment. Okay, seeing none? Yes, Celeste?
I think if you're gonna be using any, so maybe you're just striking the VR1, VR2,
Yeah.
all of it. Okay, I was
Yep.
gonna say, because otherwise you have to define what it is, because I was looking at it going, I don't know what that means. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anytime you see VR1 or 2 here, just replace it with STR, short-term rental. And we'll make that language fit with our one definition, which is any rental under 30 days. Yes, Renee? Thank you.
So I just wanted to be clear that there wasn't going to be a minimum number of nights rental, like from 1 to 30 days. 1 to 30 nights would be short term, so there wouldn't be any delineation between the minimum number of nights that a STR has to rent.
No, what we've discussed is anything under 30 days.
Okay,
There was another ordinance that we had discussed last time that was a transient ordinance that defined a minimum and a maximum. But here we're discussing only under 30 days.
will that be discussed this evening, that transient? I guess I must have missed that discussion.
We discussed it briefly of whether we wanted to adopt that language and just refer to it in this, but we decided not to. That it was just too strict, that we're basically just defining short-term rental as any rental under 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. The next section here, terms, all registrations expire on blank dates. This kind of speaks to what we did earlier, keeping that section blank until the council looks at that. Is there any comment? Seeing none. Section B, maximum number of registrations. We had discussed a potential of limiting the amount of short-term rentals, maybe by zone. The reason for that is we all obviously don't want to disturb the character of certain neighborhoods or any neighborhood in town. and discuss the possibility of capping some or keeping some more open for registration. At the time, the last time we met, we talked about the possibility of not having a cap, or at least a smaller cap on downtown areas, to hopefully bring people more to the central part of town and allow retail basically to flourish because of that. We talked about highway commercial being looked at differently as residential 1 or 2. Does anyone have any comment on whether we should limit the amounts of registrations allowed per zone or per neighborhood? Any comment? Renee?
12:30 Medway, sorry. Yeah, I do have questions about that, that perhaps maybe that could be addressed at a later date, if a problem develops, but right now I'd hate to see any discouragement of investment in the community and upgrading of buildings, and discouraging people from putting money into the town, but.
Thank you, Renee. Any other comment, Jesse? All right, Jesse.
Yeah, you can.
I think it's an appropriate time to discuss that because I, for one, I understand the business model of short-term rentals, and although they're very profitable and can be very good for investment, I also understand that they can choke off the livelihoods and the availability for housing in a town this small. I think that needs to be tempered and it needs to be capped. I'm not saying don't allow it, but it should be capped to a certain amount. Just so until we get a handle on the housing crisis here in Millinocket, as we grow, we can afford more of those properties to be developed like that. But I think we're in a struggle right now, and I think if we allow a whole lot more, we're going to be digging ourselves really deep. So until there's new structures being built or a cap put on it, I think that's an appropriate discussion to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Councilman Dora?
Yeah, Jesse just basically hit on the same things I was thinking. We just got done discussing the fact that we're looking at town-owned properties that we need to go ahead and offer out for development. What's happening is the housing market is being snatched up. We're getting a lot of speculative buying to develop short-term rentals or look to develop short-term rentals. And what it's doing is it's taking a huge piece of the housing market out of circulation. It's counterproductive to what we're doing with the mill site and with our Katahdin and trying to bring businesses in here. Those businesses are going to generate jobs. Those jobs are going to, people who are working there are going to need housing. And it's not going to be short-term rentals that they're going to be looking for. They're looking to probably buy homes and things. So it's a delicate balance that we have to achieve, but I agree that the cap needs to be done so that as Councilor Dume brought up, as the town expands, as things become more available, then we can readdress this. But I think right now, I think we need to go ahead and I would say probably it's time to start putting a cork in the bottle.
Thank you, Councilman Dora. Celeste?
That's okay. I would second that. I mean, there is a place for short-term rentals. It has done a lot to sort of upgrade properties, but it is a balance. And if you look at what's happened in Portland and other parts of Maine and all over the country, it's driven up housing prices tremendously. Because if you can turn around and generate 5 times as much income, you can then sell it for more. It brings all prices up for rental and for purchasing, not just for purchasing. And I can see it both ways. We both have 2 short-term rentals. We also have long-term rentals, and we've stayed in Airbnb, and it can be really wonderful. But if you look at, I just read an article, the city of Phoenix sold 30% of the property it sold recently was sold as short-term rentals. That is not sustainable for any community. And when Millinocket was a strong and thriving economy, all of the housing units were needed for long-term housing. So while it has been a community that's recovering from decline, in order for it to really recover, in order to bring jobs, there has to be housing, there has to be decent housing, and it's not just going to be new housing. So I think it just needs to be a balance. I think the community needs to look at it, you know, with open eyes, and it's like we have to look at it in terms of how do you feel about homeless children and homeless families, because that's what people who are living on minimum wage jobs are looking at if they have to spend a third or half of their income on housing. And so I think it's really just finding that balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. That's a great point. There's obviously a lot of things to balance here. And if we are looking at capping, perhaps by zone, maybe, or neighborhood, maybe we can do a similar map overlay like we're looking at doing for town-owned properties, so that we can basically visually see what areas we're talking about, and what kind of restrictions we might want to put on those neighborhoods. We did discuss last time, and I do see your hand up, Renee, I'll get to you in a second. We did discuss if we had a cap that was fairly low in certain neighborhoods, that we would allow basically by grandfathering in whatever existing short-term rentals there are there already. That way we're not precluding anyone who's taken a huge investment and basically saying, well, you can't do that now. And also having a date in which they need to register. And whoever registers by that date will be the cap set for that area. That's something that we've discussed, just to throw that out there. Renee?
Well, thank you very much. I totally agree with what Celeste has expressed. And it's tragic to see how how these things have happened in some of these communities. I don't think we're anywhere near there yet, but yes, we do have to set up the framework. When we started doing short-term rentals, I think there were 6 of them on Airbnb. Now there are about 160 in the region. So that speaks a lot to that. And people have stayed in our Airbnbs looking for property while they're looking for properties here. That being said, not everybody is funding things the way my husband and I are, but we're committed to at least 50% long-term housing or more to weigh out the short-term rentals. But the short-term rentals are, although everyone thinks that they're so they make so much money, they really are helping to fund investment in places. You know, people are coming to town, workers all the time, traveling nurses, electricians, and engineers. They're not looking to buy a house, but they need a place to stay for a month or 3 months or maybe 2 nights. They need to be furnished places and good repair. So we would not be able to afford to offer affordable housing to our long-term rental people. They're definitely subsidized by the summer months of short-term rentals, but I realize not everybody is operating that way, but you know, perhaps that could be a model, because it certainly helped us reinvest in the community, but not without, you know, personal risk. We've remortgaged our house in Southern Maine twice to make all of this happen, and we're really dedicated to making affordable rentals. When every inquiry I get just about for a long-term rental says that they can only afford $500 to $800 a month with everything included, I personally don't have any buildings that I can upgrade and pay the mortgage and the taxes and all of that stuff and still provide them that. But if I can offset that, I can at least offer it for 800 to 1,000 for a beautiful place that's fully furnished and heat included, plowing, the whole 9 yards. But that is definitely subsidized by short-term rentals and personal refinancing of other properties. So so it's not all grabbing money for sure. I mean, we have five buildings in Millinocket and working towards living there full time. It won't work unless we have the money to upgrade these buildings, and our end term goal is to offer these as long-term housing when the people are here that need long-term housing. But right now there are a lot of professional people coming that only need something for a month to 3 months and they need it furnished. So those short-term rentals also make it that housing available. Right now, I've got a traveler from the hospital and I've got an engineer working with our Katahdin on the salmon farm. So.
Sorry
so-
to cut you off,
Thank
just to
you.
stick
Nope.
to the agenda.
Thank you.
I appreciate your interest though in balancing both short-term and long-term. I agree it should be a model a lot of people look at. But in terms of setting a cap, should we look at doing as suggested, basically looking at a map of the town, organizing it either by neighborhood or zone and coming up with caps for those regions? Is there any opposition to that? Chief Malcolm?
Not opposition, Chairman, but I think that we need to. Our biggest goal first is to find out where they are. We don't know how many there are and what zones they're even in. Right now, we don't know, you know, there's 4 by me and I didn't even realize it. That are all short-term rentals. So I think that's a big part of it. Before we put limits on it, certain areas, we gotta find out how many are in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Malcolm. Mr. Higgins, Councilor Higgins?
I agree with Chief. Right now, we don't have any idea where they all are. And that's where the registration comes in. I understand that. But we need to see where they are and then limit them.
So perhaps for the first year that we do this, we can require registration. And if you're not registered, basically by a certain date, you can't operate. And through that, we'll understand who's registered and not. And perhaps during that time period, after we've seen who's applied and not, we'll actually have an idea of who's there or not. It's a little difficult doing research on who's registered or not, because there's so many sites. It's not just Airbnb. There's many others as well. So who's going to take the time to sift through all of these websites, basically, or apps, to see Peter's hiding, to see who's registered or not? Because that's another, that's another part of it. And how are we going to regularly enforce that? So it's a valid point, and that probably would exist whether we cap it or not. Someone still has to look over those things. Should we still anyway decide what different neighborhoods or zoning should be, and then at least determine at a future date, once the registration date is set, decide who should be in each one of those? Councilor Madore?
Yeah, I agree that we need to go ahead and I think your proposal is a good one. The thing that I worry about is the fact that without knowledge, we may go ahead and set a cap for a certain area. And then once the registrations come in, find that area is already full and no more can be done in that section of town or that area. I think we have to, I think we're trying to go ahead and play catch up right now to the situation that has blossomed in the town. I use that term loosely for Airbnbs to get some kind of handle on this and get some control over it. So I think, the sooner we get this language to the council so that we can set an appropriate date for filing registrations and then, get those processed and get an idea where it is. And then I believe we go ahead and start setting caps in areas where, we would then know where we have already existing, that's already grandfathered or has already paid. Because there's a lot of these places that if they pass inspection and that, they're gonna be grandfathered because they've been in operation for X, Y, and Z time, so. I just think that right now, I think we need to get the registrations done ASAP. And that would be first and foremost coming forward, and then work on a grid to see how much we're going to allow in any given area.
Thank you, Councilman Madore. So should we allow no more registrations past that registration date for that year?
I believe that's the first step. Yes.
Any other comment on that? Renee?
Is there, as long as I think that we can't really set a cap until all the registrations have been done by a certain deadline. Is that what you're saying? Is there any? If we
Yeah.
do that, then at least the people who register who have already purchased properties would be guaranteed of, you know.
That's
their-
exactly it.
I agree.
Yeah,
with
that's
that.
what we're. Thank you. Any other comment on that? Seeing none. Moving on, so with that, I'll basically do what we just talked about. No new registrations by whatever date we set. We can still bring a map and talk about that for the next meeting if we like. Transfer of registration for section C. We kind of just spoke to that. The policy should basically be just a new application for registration to the town. Do we want to allow for anyone to take over an existing application? So if someone had applied, let's say in this year by the deadline that we set, and halfway through the year, someone else buys it. Now they have to apply. Should they have to wait for the next registration date, or should they be allowed to fulfill the remainder of that existing registration that they have?
I believe they should have to go through the whole process again. They should go ahead and have to apply. They should have to wait, should have to apply, because I believe it's a new registration, and that would probably entail also a new inspection.
Thank you, Councilor Higgins.
Also, that way, if there were too many in one area, we would catch them then. And let me reword that. We would be able to identify the short-term rental at that time.
And I believe anyway with existing ordinances, if someone buys a new property, even if it's for the same use. I have 4 microphones now. Which is my fault, because I didn't bring batteries. Wouldn't they still have to go through the same process anyway if it were another business that they would still have to go through a similar process, Chief Malcolm? Yes, okay. Any other comments on that? So does everyone agree basically that this should be a new application that would then have to go towards the next filing date?
Yes.
Okay. D can be struck because of what I spoke to earlier. VR2 is not relevant to our language. So next page, procedure for registration and renewal. Applications, all applications for short-term rental registration shall be filed with the code enforcement on forms provided for this purpose. Any comment? Seeing none. B, fee. The non-refundable registration fee must be paid at the time the application is filed. Should we have a filing fee, or should it be free? Any comment?
There should be sorry.
Councilor Madore?
I believe like most things that, filings within the town of Millinocket, there is a minimal fee I believe this should also have one, that could be set at, once we get this all squared away, but I do believe a fee would be appropriate.
Thank you, Councilor Dorr. Any other comments? Jesse?
Once again, I think this is a business model, and I think it's a proven business model that people are making an income on. So just like any other business model that needs to apply through the code enforcement officer, we could just use that as well.
With that, Chief Malcolm, do you know of what any fees may be existing that might compare to this, whether it's a change of use fee or any kind of inspection fee that might apply?
There's no inspection fees, but there are like demolition fees or change of use fees, but I can't remember what they are. They're minimal charges.
So maybe by the next reading of this, I can have a suggestion from the code enforcement officer on what might be a valid dollar amount. If that's acceptable, and we can discuss that further then.
Yep.
Patrick?
Well, I just filed a building permit today, for instance, the state of Maine uses a 0.0015% per square foot. So that's like 15, it's not like, it was like 15% of the value of the property or the square footage. That's an example. I just, while I'm up here, I might as well just make one more comment. I think a good analogy is the lobster industry. They have zones and they have a limited amount of permits to fish for lobsters. When the person is retiring, then it gets passed down either amongst it's either family or it's back out for someone to then get that permit to lobster. It may be an analogy, because we're trying to maintain the resource.
Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Manager?
I have the current fee schedule.
Please share the fee schedule. If you could use that microphone next to you if you want.
I have the current fee schedule, can share. So you can see here, as Mr. Dorr had alluded to, many of these fees below these residential building structure is not currently by square foot, it's just an 87. Could go down through and follow for additions or alterations, sign permitting, change of use, which some of these units may be privy to. For example, if it was a retail space and it was turned into overnight accommodation, change of use permit is appropriate. And of course, any sort of electrical or plumbing. Have permits and fees for those. And this information can be found on Millinocket website, millinocket.org. Select government and code enforcement. At the bottom of that page, there's a link to them. I can put that in the chat, but he wants to check that out.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So it seems basically $100 might be an average between the 87 residential and 174 commercial.
I was thinking the same thing.
Does anyone have any opposition to a $100 registration fee?
No.
That could not have gone better.
Would that be per building?
That would be per unit.
Per unit. I think it should be cheaper.
Any other comment?
I'd say it comes into a fairly decent average, so I think it's good.
Thank you. All right, with that will be $100 per unit. Renewal. That referred to another section in Bar Harbor But if we include language that it would be in a one-time inspection, do we want to do annual renewals of registration? So inspection is different than registration. Inspection is someone coming into the units and making sure that they're safe and functional. That's a one-time thing unless there's a complaint. Do we want to have an annual registration, which is what we already talked about of doing this first year? Anyone who applies by this date, basically that will be the cap set for that year, is what we discussed. Should we continue that moving forward? Is there any comment? Renee?
I think there should just be registration for new ones or decommissioning of old ones, you know, to let the town know that it's no longer being operated as that.
Thank you, Renee. Counselor Higgins?
I believe if they register each year, it might not have to be that $100 and with the initial, but there should still be a registration fee.
Any other comment? Counselor Madore?
Yeah, I agree too. I don't think necessarily, I think that you, your first one should be the $100, but I think that for a renewal, it could be a lesser fee, but it still needs to be done yearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Madore. Should we maybe bring that down to $25 for continuing renewal?
Yeah,
Higher?
I would. Oh.
Renee?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. My question would be if previous registrants would be guaranteed their spot as long as they register by a certain deadline. Could that be in the language?
We can certainly discuss that. As we're talking about this and what I kind of spoke to earlier, someone's going to have to devote a lot of time looking into who's registered and not with the town and enforce that somehow. And we don't have staff to do that. I think we should look at these fees as being something to fund a position or someone's extra time to be able to actually look through these registrations. So if we set a cap and we sell ourselves too short, we're basically not able to fund this person to continue looking after everyone, which does hurt those who do follow the rules. If we don't have someone actually making sure that you know, people are registering in the correct way, it hurts everyone else. So Councilor Higgins suggested we potentially have a higher fee. Did you have a figure in mind or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I go $50. I mean, that way it's in half.
Anyone have any additional thoughts on that? Renee?
Well, I like the $100 than the $25, because that, you know, if you have some of us are paying up to $1,000 per year for just to advertise on platforms too. So I definitely am behind it if it's funding a certain position, you know, to have somebody researching this and enforcing that, then that makes sense to me. But if it's just a random number, just to make it expensive, then I wouldn't be in favor of that, but.
Thank you, Renee. Celeste?
I think we need to put it into context. Most of these rentals are renting for probably $100 a night, $250 a night, whatever the number is. If it's one night rental, even at $100, I don't think that's, you know, I think that's workable into a budget. Not to disagree with you, Renee, but I think we also have to look at the town. The town cannot afford to be bankrolling the extra help, you know, the extra help that is needed to oversee this. And I think that's where, again, it's hitting a balance. If you look at what people are charging per night for these rentals, the money is there. They just need to make it a priority and think of it as supporting the town in its effort to keep things under wraps. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Madore?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Higgins. I do believe that $100 preliminary registration fee, $100 $50, cut it in half, $50 each year for renewal. To be able to provide for a salaried employee to be able to monitor and to this, I think that's more than, I think that's a very fair scale to have for moving forward.
Thank you, Councilor Medora. Celeste?
Patrick just did the math, 150 units, you said at $100? $15,000. It's not even, it's maybe a part-time position for somebody or some extra hours, but it's really not a lot, at 150 units, so. Anyway,
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It would probably just be added time for an existing position. Or just a contract stipend. Any other comments on the $50 for every subsequent year? Seeing none. The code enforcement, section D, the code enforcement officer shall issue a registration to the property owner if the dwelling unit has met all requirements of this chapter. Any comment? Seeing none. Section E, within 30 days of the issuance of a new registration, the CEO shall send a one-time notification of the short-term rental to all property owners within 50 feet of the outer boundary of the property. Notice shall be deemed received if mailed to an owner's last known address according to the town tax records. This provision does not apply to registrations that are being renewed. So obviously the intent of Bar Harbor was to notify the surrounding neighbors that that unit would be used as a short-term rental, which could impact their community. I'm assuming ones that are already in existence, people already know that. This also is an added step and expense to the town to do. Just keeping that in mind. Does anyone have any comment on this, on whether you'd like to keep or remove or alter this section? Celeste?
You might just want to caveat about whether if it's a commercial, if it's actually completely commercial on all sides and there are no residential abutters, is it still necessary? I mean, maybe you still want to do it, but maybe it's being sent to residential abutters in non-commercial zones or something like that.
Thank you. Any other comment? So should we keep this then with specifying that unless it's in a commercial zone, like highway commercial or downtown commercial? Or should we keep it as is?
I think. Yeah,
Okay. Everyone good with commercial, adding that part in?
yes.
Sandra, did you have your hand up?
Well, my only comment was going to be maybe some of this needs to be put on the other homeowners. Do I deserve to be notified by the town that my neighbor is going to have a short-term rental? Or is it up to me to look at maybe a list that the town is going to have on their website of all of the short-term rentals? And that would alleviate the expense of having to notify all neighbors.
Mr. Chairman.
That's a good thought, Councilman Medora.
To me, it goes along, it's a business. And if somebody was going to go ahead and start a business either in their home or be working, that they would have to, the neighbors usually got notified. I mean, they always did. That was part of it. If you opened up a business in your home, your neighbors got notified. That was part of the town for a long time. And these are businesses, let's face it, and I think the neighbors have a right to be notified that an establishment of some type, whether it be a short-term rental or whatever, is being, is going to be an abutting neighbor or in their neighborhood, so that they can then plan accordingly to know that it's there. To be foretold is to be forewarned.
Thank you, Councilman Medora. Any other comment? Sounded like the majority was fine with keeping this section in here, just adding an exemption basically for commercial neighborhoods. Should we keep that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra, for your comments. Section F. Having secured a registration does not relieve the property owner from the obligation to obtain any additional permits necessary for the use. Any other comment? Seeing none. Section G, all issued registrations shall be filed with the building permit files under the management of the CEO. Any other comment? And seeing none. Next section, yes, Chief Malcolm.
We're saying we're gonna file those under the building permits. Is that going to be done online so that it's available online? My question is, if in the middle of the night, I need to find out this information, am I gonna be able to go in and retrieve that?
Mr. Manager, is there a way that this can be made available to emergency personnel for that purpose?
You're speaking of contact information or permitting you?
Contact information. Although, yeah, no, I guess that's a moot point, sorry, because it will be on the file on the door anyway, so, yeah, I'm good, thank you.
But stay tuned, because it should be able to be linked with some potential online code permit development.
Well, it would be great,
Popping up in the very near future.
that would be great if we could do that.
Thank you, Chief
Fantastic.
Malcolm.
Remember that on Thursday.
I'm very sorry, I apologize if this is out of context for your meeting, but I need to leave. I'm very interested in the last the revision of the tax acquired property. So either I can submit my comments or questions in writing, or I can request the committee to move that to the next economic development committee. Your choice.
You can submit your comment. It's gonna have to go before the council again anyway,
Sure.
so there can be additional comment on that. So if you want to submit your comment now, I can read it.
No, I don't have them. It's just scribbles on my paper here.
Okay.
So I can put them in an email fashion to
Okay.
yourself and the rest of the committee. and
Yeah.
that's- Thank
That
you.
would work. Thank you, Jesse. The next section, life safety inspections and inspection schedule. Section A, the registration of a short-term rental shall be subject to an initial inspection of life safety requirements by the CEO, and thereafter registration renewals shall be subject to an inspection every 3 years. We changed this obviously to make it just a one-time inspection unless there's a complaint
Or change of.
or change of use or owner. Is everyone good with that still? Okay. Steve Malcolm?
I'm Malcolm, 73 School Street. The only caveat to that is your CEO is not a life safety inspector. Okay.
So requirements of
What
CEO,
happens right now is him and I do that together. When we go to do a building inspection, he does his part and I do the life. That's what we've always done here. Just the information.
so then it'll be an initial inspection of life safety requirements by the CEO and life safety inspector. Thank you. Section B, all short-term rentals shall comply with subsection 1, the following chapters of the NFPA 101 Life Safety Code is most recently amended and edited, and as applicable. Chief Malcolm, is there already language like this that we could refer to so we don't have to lay it all out?
Yes. Sorry, yeah, the way that we've got that written, right now. Those are the general, they can look at Life Safety Code 101 and find those chapters and it refers to that stuff. And then as far as the town of Milwaukee, we have an ordinance on rental properties. And the life safety inspection that we follow. We don't follow the most current, Maine hasn't adopted the most current one. I believe the one that we use is 2001, 2000 or 2001, which is the same one. So we would just refer to that.
So basically, if we just deleted everything after and as applicable, it would fit. Okay. Does anyone have any comment on that? Okay, so we'll delete those subsections. Chapter blank, electrical installations of the town of Millinocket as it may be amended, edited, and as applicable. Any comments? Chief Malcolm? Getting an exercise tonight.
That, see, that's when it comes, that's, the electrical inspector has to do that. That would be, and that's part of the permit, when they put in a permit to change electrical, then he has to go out and check that anyway, so it's part of that.
So should we keep this in there? Do you recommend we keep this in here or get rid of it because it's already most likely
It's
in?
going to be addressed by us, and if I find something during my life safety inspection that I feel isn't right, then I'm gonna have the electrical inspector come in and verify that it is or it is not. I know enough about electrical to get myself in trouble, so I would call somebody else to come in and look at it. I know Chris feels the same way when we've been out looking at stuff. If we feel that there's something we're not sure, we would have the town's electrical inspector, that's what he's there for.
So as it reads, basically the end of that sentence is as applicable. So that would fit within what you're currently doing and,
Yes.
okay. Any comment on that?
I'd
Councilor
hang on to it only because the fact that you don't want to necessarily have a repercussion where somebody says, well, I wasn't told or whatever, it's right there, it's still here, and it still gives, a good basis for knowing what's necessary, so I'd keep it.
Thank you. Any other comment? Seeing none. Next section, violations, penalties and fines. Violation of operating without a registration. It shall be a violation of this chapter for any person to advertise for rent, delete the second rent, or operate a short-term rental without a valid registration. If after investigation, the code enforcement officer finds that a short-term rental is being advertised for rent or is being rented without a valid registration, written notice shall be given by certified mail, return receipt requested of such violation to their property owner. A copy of such notice shall be submitted to the town council and shall be maintained as a permanent record. This violation shall prohibit the property owner from applying for a short-term rental registration for the property in violation for 12 months from the date of the payment of the applicable fine. The fine for operating without a valid registration shall be $250 per day for each day of operation without a valid registration as determined by the code enforcement officer. Any comment on that? And I would note, very similar language exists for almost any other violation of a certain amount of dollars per day that a violation is being witnessed. $250 may sound like a lot, but it's actually pretty similar to what a lot of the dollar amounts already are in our code.
I think it's fine. I do like, unless there is any conflict, in which case the fine would be whatever would be the stronger if there's conflict.
Yeah, that's what I included in there. If there's some language that's already in existence in code that's stronger, I suggested maybe we should say, or whichever is stronger.
Right.
So if everyone's okay with that, I'll just include that part to it as well. Okay. Section B, violation of registration. The code enforcement officer shall investigate all alleged violations and enforce the provisions of this chapter in terms of conditions of the registration. If after investigation, the code enforcement officer finds that any provision of this chapter or any term of condition of any registration granted under this chapter is being violated, written notice shall be given by certified mail, return receipt requested of such violation to the owner and to any other person responsible for such violation, indicating the nature of the violation and ordering that action necessary to correct it be taken within a reasonable time frame, determined by the code enforcement officer. A copy of such notice shall be submitted to the town council and shall be maintained as a permanent record. Any issue with that? Chief Malcolm?
I don't have a suggestion, but I'm just trying to play this through my mind, because if we get a alleged violation and we go to that apartment or that house and find that it's a life safety violation, we need to have something in there that we can immediately shut that down, because we're gonna immediately shut it down. If we go in and that something is alleged and it is a true life safety code violation, then I don't have any choice but to shut that down immediately.
I think you're already granted to do so in any circumstance, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Whether it's short-term rental, long-term, permanent residence. Should we refer to maybe a certain section in the code that already allows you to do that?
I would think that would be.
I think we need something in there just so that we're
Yeah, I can add that in here. As a violation. So I can make a subsection 2 to B, basically. Referring to the existing life safety violations, allowing it to be shut down pertaining to already existing ordinance.
I'm just looking to cover everything so that if we get into that situation, we have something to stand on.
Understandable.
Okay. Subsection 1, if after given notice pursuant to blank, the violation is not abated or corrected within the specific time frame, the code enforcement officer shall report same to the town council. The code enforcement officer's report shall indicate the additional enforcement actions under consideration and whether the town attorney has been consulted or will subsequently be involved. At its next meeting, the town council shall vote to accept the code enforcement officer's report. The town council shall not entertain comment from the person alleged to have violated this chapter, nor should it take any evidence relating to whether a violation has in fact occurred. I feel like we should, part of the reason we chose to take the Bar Harbor language was because it was vetted by their lawyers and other lawyers for quite some time with a lot of public input. So it basically helps us work off of a document that's been thoroughly vetted. Obviously, this is a whole bunch of more stuff for a town council to deal with. Should we perhaps reach out to our lawyer and see if this is necessary, or if we can just grant the code enforcement officer to carry out their duties to do this without council intervention?
I would refer this to the lawyer, make sure that what we're doing is absolutely legal and has, we're not in violation of anybody's situation or rights.
Because how I see this going is, especially in a small town like this, if we have to start taking cases of violations and vote on them, that's going to add a whole other dynamic to our functioning as a council. I feel like the code enforcement officer should be able to just carry out their duties if someone's violating things, and the council really should not get involved unless legal actions being taken.
I would prefer
Everything up until that point. Yeah.
I would prefer the council not involved in this and let it be the code enforcement officer.
So Peter, this section, if you could basically run this by our lawyer and just make sure we can just have this all in the code enforcement officer's hands and not go through the council, if there's any issues with that. Thank you. Suspension and revocation of registration. Suspension minor violation. The code enforcement officer shall suspend a registration for failure to correct the violation. The suspension may not exceed 3 months. Operation of the short-term rental during the period of suspension shall be a violation subject to a fine of $500 a day. So we're going to have to define, basically, if we want to adopt this, what a minor violation versus a major violation is. And they both seem to have a $500 per day penalty. The only difference is how many months they won't be able to operate for. Should we have one type of suspension and not have to define minor and major?
I would have it as one. I think that, again, why not simplify the process and have it just as violation and not whether it's a minor or major, because the fine basically is the same either way, it's just the duration.
What if we do it so that if they receive a second violation, basically the first violation will have to pay the penalty, but they can go back into business. But if they violate it again, then they can be revoked for a full 12 months.
I'm okay.
Okay. I'll have to write that down. And then the same $500 per day fee is good with everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So do we want to have them be able to operate immediately following rectifying the situation for their first violation? As deemed by the code enforcement officer that they've rectified it?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next section, revocation, in cases of recurring major violations or in certain, this is basically what I was just saying, or in certain cases of criminal activity, code enforcement officer may revoke a registration altogether. I think the code enforcement officer should have that ability.
Right.
Okay. Look at that, last paragraph. In accordance with the process outlined in subsection blank, the Board of Appeals may, upon written application of aggrieved party received by the planning board within 30 days of any decision or enforcement action which interprets this chapter, or hear an appeal for such decision. For purposes of the section, the term decision is limited to an order, decision, or enforcement action made in writing. Everyone good with that? Okay. So I will edit this, send it to the manager to then send to our lawyer to review. And assuming everything's fine, we will do a final reading at the next committee meeting to make sure everything is as we discussed. And then make a recommendation to the council if that works for everyone.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Ready for more?
Yes.
Funds for economic development. So we have 3 accounts that we have a decent amount of funds in for economic development purposes. One of which is a budgeted line that Councilor Madore came up with that the council supported, I think, fully. Of putting in $25,000 per year for economic development purposes. We have yet to look at how we want to use that and where. So that's one pool of money that we should discuss as a committee, maybe not tonight, but at least putting it in your heads to think about for the next one. The second one is a revolving loan for small businesses. It has roughly $60,000 in it. This is money that's been sitting for quite some time that used to be a part of a revolving loan program. It has not been used in a long time, but we still have use of it. And I believe we're still under certain conditions of how we may use it. It has to function in a similar manner of how it was originally intended, if I'm not mistaken. I think you're the.
Absolutely, yeah, we have to, the only thing we could do in that situation is we would have to go ahead and if we wanted to go ahead and get change of use for it, we'd have to apply to see if we could get out from under the encumbrances that go along with that loan.
But otherwise, it's a program that we can use for a similar purpose, whether we're doing no interest loans or whatnot to small businesses. That's another pool of money to think about. We also have a remaining balance from a grant that we got for the downtown. It was supposed to have covered projects both in Veterans Park and throughout the downtown for lighting. But because of the cost of inflation and other things, we were only able to do the Veterans Park portion. So we have about $55,000 left in those funds. Those also have restrictions on how we can use it. I believe it's only for the downtown area. Isn't that right, Mr. Manager?
Yeah, that's correct. Downtown area should be associated with lighting, electrical infrastructure. good opportunity to save matching funds on charging stations. But, yeah, lighting, electric.
So basically with these three areas of funding that we have already in existence, let's put our heads together for the next meeting if we have any ideas of how we might want to spend that. The manager just made a suggestion of using some of those funds for our match for the EV charging stations. But if there's anything else, please come to the committee next time with any suggestions. Are there any comments on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Madore?
are we looking to, in this idea, are we looking to go ahead, like, for instance, the economic development line for 25,000? Are we looking to spend that before the new budget season starts? Or is the idea to use that money before we go ahead and get into the next budget cycle?
I mean, we can make any recommendation we want to the council. Ideally, we'll have found a project because we raised the funds to be able to spend it before the next fiscal year.
Okay.
But it's up to us as a committee to decide what we recommend.
Okay.
We could recommend that we don't use it, but I think we should. Not that I have opinions or anything. Thank you, Councilman. Only one to laugh at my jokes. Any other comment on that? Seeing none. So next time, please come with thoughts on those three items. And tying that in with this next item, we could potentially collaborate with the KTP, that's the Katahdin Tourism Partnership. They're the ones that own the lot basically at the corner where the old
Newberry's.
yeah, Newberry's used to be. So they have had plans of putting a park there for some time. Funding is an issue just like for everyone else. So if we have some funds in either one of these lines that we might want to use to help them in their process, whether we're helping with the match grant or even just paying for something outright with some of these funds, that's an option as well. I know our former counselor, Randy Jackson, is on their board and others as well. So maybe I can invite him or others to come speak to what they're planning for that property. I think it's a good update for the council as a whole anyway, being a very integral part of the town. So feel free to wrap your heads around that and come up with thoughts for next meeting. Councilor Madore?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one thing that's come up time and time again, we haven't been able to go through with it, and I think there is a need for it, is public restrooms in the downtown area. And I think that if you're looking at something that could be used, funding to develop and move forward, I think that would be a great shot in the arm for the downtown area for festivals, marathons, events, things like that, and or just for the general public for people hiking the Appalachian Trail or whatever coming into town. But having public restrooms in the downtown area, I think would be a good idea. I think we've had it multiple times, thought about it, but I'd like to move it forward if it's possible.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any other comments? Councilor Higgins?
You're talking about a public restroom building, not porta potties, correct?
No,
Like we
not
have up
porta
on top of that.
An actual public restroom building, yes.
Okay. I would agree with that. That porta potty at the top of the hill.
Okay, so last item on the agenda here is revision of the tax acquired property bidding process. I think this can be short and sweet because I don't think anyone really is in opposition to this. We do have a current policy for tax acquired properties. I think most of people's intention is to change this from a bidding process to essentially an RFP process, as I spoke to earlier. People can create a proposal for what they'd like to do with the property, and it doesn't necessarily hinge on how much money they're looking to buy the property for. It's more on what the purpose is, what their resources might be. So we can set a different type of criteria, essentially, rather than making it a process that people associate with the highest person who, or the highest bid gets the property. This is pretty long and spelled out, so I don't think we need all this language, and I'm sure that, especially because I gave it to people at the last minute, most people have not read through the whole thing. Would everyone be okay with me creating a draft of what our new policy could be and sending that to you in the near future to then review at the next committee meeting, if it follows basically that spirit of RFP rather than bidding process?
Only thing I would ask, Mr. Chairman, if that whatever the bottom line is, that it the proposal that comes through should the town should be able to recoup the money that is owed, so that whatever bottom line you want to put down there, it has to, the bid has to go ahead and cover what is owed to the community. I mean, we don't have to make a profit on it, but we do need to go ahead and at least get the money that's owed on the property.
Thank you, Councilor Dora. Councilor Higgins?
On the whole bidding process, I haven't sat through the last one. It was pretty intense. I like the option where we can decide who we're gonna accept the bid from, as far as who we're awarding it to. I don't necessarily believe that it should be the highest bidder. It's not necessarily the best answer on all accounts. I liked when they submitted the bids, they stated what they were gonna use the property for, that they were bidding on. And there was a lot of questions from the public on the whole process as far as, and it's written right here, the land of butter doesn't get first option, which is, I totally understand that. But the big thing is taking and just saying we're gonna go with the highest bid. It's not. Yes, we need to recuperate up the town's costs. But this is not the way that we are making the money for the town, not our revenue. If we were to go that way, we might be taken away from a younger couple that's just starting out, that can't afford it. And with us being able to vote on it, they're just taking the highest bid is the easiest way out. And I don't think there's a lot more to it that needs to go into it. There's a lot of examples and a lot of considerations that need to be handled. And it was a learning experience for sure.
Just to add to that, and I'll get to you and Sandra Sullivan. I agree entirely with what you said. It's still difficult to act without any parameters, obviously. A thought that I had was perhaps usually when there's a new council every year, we come up with our goals and visions for the upcoming year. We also have a comprehensive plan that we spent a lot of time defining what we're trying to achieve in the next 10 years. Perhaps we can reference to keep it broad enough, but still specific enough that the council will, basically make it a priority to award properties in line with the council goals for that year and for the comprehensive plan that we've already voted on and discussed and approved. That might be a broad enough, but still specific enough reference so people understand what we're really trying to accomplish as a whole for the town, not just this one property or this idea against that idea. Are there any thoughts on that?
Not a bad concept. I going back though, I think what we just witnessed with the last time around and why we're readdressing this again is not necessarily the bid process, though I do agree that, changing it so that it's not a bidding war is a good idea. But the process by which we allow for, I mean, originally, when this started out, when somebody would come up to, we would go ahead and you want to bid on the property, you outline in the application what you're going to do with the property or what your proposal is for the property. And then if you are in the audience, you get one bite of the apple to come up and state your claim. What we ended up with was grandparents and parents and this and that. Nobody should be allowed to address the council if they are not the actual bidder. That should be first and foremost. You know, the fact that somebody's got a friend of a friend who thinks they're a wonderful person or whatever, and they should get it, is irrelevant. The council should be able to go ahead and just have the bidder address the council one time to, you know, anything they may have omitted or not be, you know, they thought of to plead their case. But not the constant. It was never meant to be a conversation. It was meant to be, you know, put your proposal in and put it in writing so that people could look at it that way. I think there's where the problem started, and it has grown exponentially from there. I think it's more of a procedural thing and how we allow for public comment. There were people commenting who had nothing to do with the house and things, so I think we need to go ahead and stop that. I think it needs to go back to the basics of proposal, statement, if you're available in the audience, and that's it. And then the council goes from there with the
Thank you,
process.
Councilman Madore. The only issue with that is that we have to allow all public comment. I think if we create a policy that allows only bidders to speak in support of their bid, but any other public comment cannot be in support of someone else's bid, but it can be on the general process or our general thoughts or feelings on it, that would allow for the public to comment as they are entitled to without restricting them in that way, but also preventing people from saying, well, I think this person should get it, or I think that person should get it.
Yeah, I just, like I say, I just think that we're getting deeper into a quagmire of, you know, too many hands in the process.
What do you think about that suggestion?
I think the suggestion would be good.
Thank you. Sandra?
Two things. I agree that only the people who are putting in the bid should be speaking. However, this is the day and age of Zoom. And there was one family in particular this time who evidently the whole family was ill. Do you really want them in the chamber? Because it's mandated that they have to be there if they want to bid on this property, or can they speak on Zoom? My other comment is most of these houses in particular are town-owned property due to someone else's unfortunate circumstances. Let me just say it that way. And so for someone to bid higher than others, to use it as a second home, I do not think is right. It was someone's ill fortune that that property is now in the hands of the town. And I think that it should be only first-time home buyers who are allowed to bid on it. The people who need the hand up to maybe have a home for their family. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Sandra. I just want to clarify the first point that you mentioned. No one is mandated to speak to their bid. They can if they would like, but our existing policies that have been in place for some time allows for people to submit written comment if they know that they can't make it. And our existing policies also allow people to attend via Zoom with the requirement that they have their camera functioning. So if they know that ahead of time and research what the process is and what they need to do in order to give their perspective on it, they don't have to be here physically in the chambers to do so. But it's not mandated that they have to comment on their bid.
I was
you,
just
Sandra.
I was just reacting to what Councilman Madore had just said, because as I understood what he just said was that the people had to be in the chamber and speak. I'm sorry then, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said then.
No, they don't have to in the time of Zoom especially, they don't have to be in the chamber to address the council. They can address it over Zoom. But the chairman is right. They need to know that they have to have their face so that we know who it is and can identify them to make sure for, just identity sake. Other than that, no, there's no hard and fast rule that they have to be in this building to comment.
Thank you. Brittany?
I haven't had a lot of time to look through this, but the only timeline that I see is regarding demolition. Is there any kind of timeline for an uninhabitable home being habitable if they're awarded the tax property?
It's a good question. Chief Malcolm or Mr. Manager, do you have an answer to that? I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of.
But I think we have something similar on the books in general of an uninhabitable building. It has to be rectified in a certain manner. I'm sure there's a process to that. Mr. Higgins, did you want to comment before Chief speaks?
Yes, if I remember right from the last, when we did do the property bids last time, it was 1 year.
So the 1 year timeframe is for updating the facade.
Right.
It's
Right.
just directed at the exterior.
And that was, if I could, that is put into the deed. When the deed is issued, that they have 1 year to upgrade the facade of the property. The inside, we didn't put a timeline on.
No, and we don't have any, there's nothing we can do with it. If they buy that property, they have 1 year for council to bring it up. The outside of, as the manager said, the outside of the building, nothing about the inside.
Right.
And I think that's a thing that we really do need to address. I think Brittany's right.
If you were to address it, Chief Malcolm, what would you add to the restriction?
I think you gotta have the same kind of timeline, maybe give them another 6 months, maybe give about 18 months to get the interior, but. Or at least be doing something, okay? Not so much that has to be done. If you can show us that you're progressing to do something. But I mean, we see these places that nothing has been done. And then we start getting the phone calls, I start getting the phone calls, Chris starts getting the phone calls, the building is falling down.
Right.
And then although it's a tax acquired property that we have sold to somebody, okay, and as the Councilman Core says, it's in the deed. But if we don't enforce that,
Right.
and something happens and that building falls and a child gets hurt, that's gonna come back. In my opinion, that's gonna come back on the town of Millinocket.
And just to
Thank
be
you.
clear, those deed restrictions are new. So there may have been properties that were sold 5, 6 years ago or longer.
Right.
That are in the condition you're referencing that did not have that deed restriction, and that does make it harder to enforce.
Right, and we've talked about this before, when they were doing these plans before, I've urged them to do something with the same thing with getting the facade is great. I mean, that it makes it look a lot better, but the place has got to be livable. It's got to be inhabitable, or it's still just a building standing there.
Mr. Chairman, if I could offer, I think what the chief just mentioned, an 18-month timeline to make a property habitable. It takes, we have to wait 18 months to go through the process of claiming the property to begin with as a town. So I don't think that it's unreasonable to give the new owner 18 months to make it habitable. For them to be able to, it doesn't have to be completely finished, but it has to be habitable within an 18-month timeline. I think that's a good bar to set right there as far as the time is concerned.
So what if we include inhabitable or up to code for its proposed purpose, because it may not be residential, it may be commercial or industrial. So inhabitable or up to the code for its intended purpose. That work for everyone?
Within 18 months.
Within 18 months, does anyone have an issue with 18 months? Reasonable. Okay. Yep, go ahead.
I think there's potentially some room for a caveat around availability of contractors or materials, maybe a clause about communication. If the deadline's approaching, but have arrangement with an electrician to rewire the property to make it habitable on the inside, or a plumber for that matter, but they can't get there for another 2 months, say. I think there could be some wiggle room if it's communicated respectfully and in a timely manner.
And that kind of process already exists in people who are late for their property taxes. They work with the town on getting back in current standing,
Getting an extension.
coming up with a plan. So maybe in line with that, the code enforcement officer and or manager may have the authority to extend that time frame based upon their communications with, does that work?
Yes.
Okay. So I can put those thoughts, unless there are others, I can put those thoughts into a policy and then bring it back for us to review. And obviously, if you have any other thoughts at that point to add or change, I'll be happy to do so. But is everyone good with where we're at, or any other comments? Okay. That is it.
Mr. Chairman, just real,
We would like to adjourn?
Not adjourned yet.
Okay.
just real quick, I'd like to thank you for putting this all together. It makes it much easier for us to go ahead and go through this, so I appreciate the effort. I appreciate the time that you put in on it, and I want to commend you for the work that you've done so far getting this together and continuing to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Councilor Higgins?
Yeah, and in light of the past few months, I'm gonna say the town has lost a lot of businesses. We need to start looking at, is there a way that we can help? I mean, I understand that we're trying to bring businesses into the community, but we have to take care of the businesses that are in the community now. We're losing them. I mean, you got House of Pizza, there's no one in there now. And we saw what happened up the road at the restaurant, so. We can't keep losing these businesses as much as we want to bring new ones in. We gotta keep our people here. We're losing them.
I agree 100%. It is a very difficult thing to do. Given we are in a very rigged economic system with incredible corporate interests. I did create and put forward a pretty comprehensive assessment of the town. I can send it to you if you'd like. It's on the website. It's basically the capital flow of how money flows through the town and how it gets digested, so to speak, by the local businesses and where it flows out. The majority of the money that comes into the town leaves. It's called economic leakage. The more corporations that are not based in town that exist here, the more money leaves. It's that simple. So most of America is more and more dependent upon these chains and outside companies basically coming in and taking business, whether it was existing or not, from any opportunities locally. And although some of it may stay from, hourly wages or whatnot for employees, all the profits leave. And they usually have corporate policies that don't allow them to work with local businesses. They have to work with whatever franchise agreements they have in place or other corporate policies that prohibit them from doing anything outside of their operations. So that's the biggest challenge, is how do we look at opportunities to slowly siphon off basically that economic leakage and make more and more money stay in the community. And there are good opportunities for that. It's just not easy. And we can try and incentivize that, but it's expensive. But I think you're thinking the right thing. And we have those three pools of money that could make a tiny dent in that. But it is a place to start.
I think fostering entrepreneurship within the community. Because basically what you do have, unfortunately for Millinocket, is an aging population. People who would normally be interested in starting a business or carrying a business forward would be somebody of, for instance, your generation necessarily or whatever, people who are 50 plus, which we have a great deal within the community. They're in the twilight of their life, and they don't necessarily want to start another business, try to grow it during this, so I think there lies a big problem too. But I think encouraging entrepreneurship is a big plus moving forward that has to be addressed. I think we have to go ahead and try to foster the next generation of locally owned businesses, as well as retain the ones that we have. Again, I think the town has options. I know that this may require the municipality to get into some things that a lot of times before in the past, we've kind of shied away from, as far as trying to, there's always been a line between how much municipalities get into business and business get into municipalities. And I think now that line is going to get probably a little blurred moving forward, especially for smaller communities like ours, trying to go ahead and move up.
Well, supporting entrepreneurship is definitely a great way to start. We have this big piece of property at the airport, which we're having a fellow hopefully come up with ideas of how that land could be used for different purposes. When I first got on the council, I mentioned we should look at tax acquired properties as an opportunity to pair that with a business plan of a potential business that could be started in town, and have it as a package for a young family or entrepreneurs who can come in and not only have all the resources needed to start a business, but also have a place to live, and it be kind of a package deal to help people in. At the time, Councilor Madore and others were not.
We're not very happy with the proposal. But again, we need to look at what is necessary to start with. To me, one of the big things is, if you want people to be able to go ahead and develop or keep the businesses going within the community, is childcare. Having a place where a daycare, where people can go ahead and have their children if they're not in school or whatever, and allow them to foster themselves out to be able to then free up their time to be able to maybe start a business or work a business or whatever. But I mean, there are certain things the town can do. They can look for a property that might provide an opportunity for a daycare center, which Millinocket has none.
Well, it's obviously a broader discussion that we can continue having, but I appreciate you bringing it up. I think everyone here supports what you're saying. It's just a matter of strategy and how we accomplish those goals, and it's complicated. But certainly something I can even keep on the agenda as an ongoing discussion that we have.
I think that'd be good.
Forward. Yeah. Unless there's any other comment or thought. Another one, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I mean, I just didn't know if some of the businesses that were, how do I put it? I guess, how many of the businesses would know that some of these were here? I mean, how can we assist some of these businesses that are strapped there? The best way to do it, or run into hard times. I mean, that revolving loan be able to help, or with, I mean, I know we've got that budgeted ED line downtown for $25,000. Do we have to spend that money? I mean, can that 25, so we don't spend it this year, so we get it for next year? No, I'm not saying double it up. I'm saying just because we have the money, we don't have to spend it. But for some of these businesses that are leaving the area, $25,000 might help them. Is there something that we can do as a town? I'm not saying we're going to loan them the money or we're giving them the money. I'm just saying we got to do something to help these businesses stay here. We're going to keep losing them. I mean, you look at Main Street and how many businesses we've lost. Yeah, we've got new ones on the corners, and that's good. I mean, that's businesses for the area, and that's here in our town. But you look how many other empty buildings are on this Main Street.
Unfortunately, the revolving loan fund, the way we had it before, the application process that was drawn up by a previous town manager was so complicated and so in-depth that it turned a lot of businesses off from being able to take advantage of the loan fund. And I think if we streamline that process with money that's left available to be able to offer low interest loans, at least, you know, but we have to make the application process a lot less daunting so that they can take advantage of it.
Thank you, Councilor Higgins and Madore. Brittany, you do have experience going business to business in your current and previous roles. Do you have any thoughts on what the existing barriers are to accomplishing what Councilor Higgins is saying, or any suggestions on what we might be able to do?
When I had gone business to business, I was trying to approach people for that type of assistance, and it was in the form of a small short-term grant. A lot of people weren't interested in sharing any kind of financial information, or saw it as more just like no, I don't want to be involved with anything like that. Very put off by that kind of atmosphere. So thinking about it as you guys are talking, I look at like the $25,000 as something that could be used as match for something much bigger, whether it's business specific, like they're applying for that money and they get like maybe $5,000. And there's so much other grant money that can be used as match for that, and they can just make their dollar go so much further. For example, like if we're looking, and that can also go in line with a lot of the other goals that the town has already set. So like for age friendly, we want to see ADA accessibility in every single business downtown, not be a hassle to get around anywhere. So what if 1 year the focus of the downtown is to increase ADA accessibility? So any business that is set up for that at that time has, you know, the support of the age friendly committee. There's already all that data, all the information. They have this $5,000 grant from the town, and they can look for other funding elsewhere to make it go further. So that was a lot of information all at once and all over the place. But yeah, I don't see like giving businesses that money without any kind of plan going very far.
Oh, no, I agree.
Which I'm not saying that's what you were saying, it's just, yeah.
And I wasn't saying that. I mean, they have to have a reason for it, but like I said, many businesses were impacted this year because like the snowmobiles didn't come in. So we saw what happened with some businesses. Yes. Some of these businesses that are starting up, they just don't know where they can reach out for help. And in comments, you going door to door and stuff, I understand that, but it's someone from Maine. We're very proud people, and we 9 times out of 10 don't like asking. So a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the foot that way, but that might have been part of the reason why they didn't want to be forthcoming, because they are very proud people.
It's odd though, if they went to a bank and were going to apply for any type of loan or anything else, those financials would have to be available. But if they're gonna go through the town, that was another sticking point. They didn't want to provide that, you know, so.
Well,
Sandra,
this is
yeah.
from the perspective of, nonprofit, not the town, so that could also be different.
Right.
What that brought with it.
Sandra, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I moved here from Waterville. And Waterville from Main Street, from one end to the other, was made up of several TIFs. Where business owners were offered tax breaks for 5 years or 8 years, or however many years you negotiate with the town. That not only helps the business owners, and I don't understand TIFs how they work, but I know that it also took some of the tax off the town that they owed the state because of offering these TIFs.
Thank you, Sandra. That's definitely an option. The TIF is a tax increment financing tool that can be used to basically raise money for the town to reinvest more in their economic development. And it's certainly a good tool. It's a little harder to do with an area that already has businesses. Because then you run into the issue of there being some vacant spaces and incentivizing new people versus the people that are existing, and how the tax base might be affected from that change. It's usually best used in a new area, such as if we have a large piece of property that the town owns that we want to put out there, we could create a TIF zone for that property for development. We could do it for the mill site. We could do it for any other new development area, really, so that any new tax dollars that are raised can go towards this program, basically. So it is a really good point, and something that we can look at and maybe match or pair with the RFPs that we put out, if that's something to do. Go ahead, Sandra.
It was, I lived in Waterville for 10 years before I moved up here. And certainly the main street of Waterville existed long before I moved there. And I would bet in the time that I was there going to the meetings, that there were at least 6 to 8 TIFs offered. And they were new businesses coming into existing buildings. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I don't know how it all works, except that it seemed to work very well for Waterville. Like I said, the entire Main Street from one end to the other and front to back is TIFs.
Thank you, Sandra. Yes, Peter.
I'm not necessarily speaking against TIFs by any means. I think plenty of great examples of them being used and plenty of opportunity for us to use them here. I just want to point out that it's usually an exorbitant amount of legal fees to starting TIFs. It's a big investment, so it's not going to pay off immediately. But it's certainly something for us to consider. Regarding the other funding, I would urge the committee to consider the big picture, not close the book on the small loans or the small grants or whatever that may be, but also continue to encourage communication on needs and communication on ideas from local business owners. We do not have a track record of having attendance from local business owners, but we would love to have more input from business owners of what they see as need or what they see as potentially beneficial. Another point that I would make is, it's important to stay in your lane and compare to what resources are already available. What do municipalities, what is the business of a municipality? As opposed to what is the business of Amy Collinsworth, the Economic Development Director at the MDC, whose job is to do exactly what we are discussing. So I don't want to say, I'm gonna say, stay, we need to stay in our lane, but we need to be creative on probably not offering the same thing that she offers to local businesses, or at least help facilitate that or communicate that. I took a phone call just this afternoon, somebody who's from Millinocket, moving back, wants to start a business, has all of the, much of the resources to do so and a plan and everything. But what they needed was not something the town provides, but I made a recommendation to Amy Collinsworth, the MDC, to take it from there to help with business funding, business plan, sorts of resources. So I think we should be cognizant what our roles are and how we're not duplicating, or how we could be duplicating.
That's a good point.
Yeah, channeling, not competing.
That's a good point. I don't think it would hurt to even just make a post asking how the town can help businesses. And see what the response is. And with that.
That sounds very.
Yeah. But I mean, why not ask to get an understanding of what they're struggling with? It can be confidential. It doesn't have to be, and it can be submitted in email just to the committee. So we can at least have an idea of what they're thinking without knowing exactly who they are. So it doesn't have to be email, maybe something written or whatever. But based upon that response, we can create a list of the resources that already exist in response. So we're not basically trying to duplicate efforts or do anything that we can't, but instead offering to whoever submitted, this is what's out there. Brittany?
I would like to suggest that maybe, so there's the economic development survey that's usually given by the town to residents or visitors, maybe we've gotten a lot of amazing data from that. But a lot of it is the same thing every year. We know what we need to address. Maybe this year, if we can do a survey, it can be geared towards local businesses or business owners or entrepreneurs to get that specific data to support what we're trying to do. And that is confidential. It's not attached to any name unless they want to share that.
I think it's a great idea.
So we can do that. That was something that we've done annually for some time. I haven't done it in a couple of years, but it was for like individuals and their ideas, but that's a great idea. If everyone's good with that, we can look at ways to create a new survey for businesses that are confidential and yep. Great. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilor Higgins. With that, unless there's anything else.
Oh, I moved that we adjourn.
We are adjourned.